Hello, everyone. And today I'm going to be talking to Bruce Maddy-Weitzman. Bruce and I have never met other than the past like 5 minutes. And Bruce is a historian, and my mother got us in touch because Bruce has been apparently contacted by some of the authorities. He'll tell us soon about the details of that to take on a very, very difficult but important task, and that is to start talking to some of the people that survived the massacre in Gaza. Um, so, as I mentioned, I haven't spoken to Bruce at all before this. I'm coming into this just as clueless as you, my viewers, are as to what will happen in this conversation. So, Bruce, can you tell us just like, in two sentences, what is your profession? I know you're a historian. I don't actually know what that means other than unless it means you're a professor of history. But I don't know if maybe you're also an active historian that does research in history. I really don't know. So if you could tell us
Okay.
in 2 seconds what that is, and then we'll go on to what you're
Sure.
doing now.
Okay, so I've actually I'm officially retired. I would say this a professor emeritus, which sounds like I've been put out to pasture, from Tel Aviv University, at in the Department of Middle Eastern and African History, and I'm also a senior fellow at the Moshe Dayan Center for Middle Eastern and African Studies, which is affiliated also which is part of Tel Aviv University as well. I've over the years worked on a whole variety of subjects dealing with the modern Arab politics, regional politics, and also North African politics and state and society, and taught courses on various aspects of those things, including courses on the Arab-Israeli conflict, and so I've been sort of immersed professionally the modern history and contemporary, what we call contemporary history, like contemporary affairs of this region.
I see.
Um, and I am, as I said, officially retired, which basically means that I can do whatever I want,
Hmm.
and I don't have to teach. So
Right.
I pick my projects as they move me or as they come along,
Right.
if you will.
And um, you're obviously with American background. So when did you come to Israel?
Correct. That's correct. I it's fair to say that I got the bug very early as a kid, and I grew up in a house where Israel was highly valued, was central to our own Jewish identity.
Hmm.
Uh, and my mother was active in the labor Zionist movement in the United States, and started coming here as a teenager, and liked what I saw. Drank the Kool-Aid, so to speak,
Yeah.
and one thing led to another, and I came back on numerous occasions. I studied at the Hebrew University in 1973 as an overseas student, which was a very formative experience for a lot of us because that was the year,
For
of course, of
sure.
the 1973 war.
Right.
And I also met my wife that year, and my future wife, and I came back to live here in 1979. So, I mean, I came for good, moved here
Yeah.
with my wife in 1979, and have been here ever since, and raised a family here, two children, now adults, and with grandchildren, and
Hmm.
a, a present in Ra'anana, actually, for
Oh, I didn't know.
most of that time, actually, where I live, just north of Tel Aviv, same place, same
Yeah,
town
that's
as
that's where I
you.
live too. Yeah.
Exactly. And so I've been. I spent a year in Jerusalem, a year in Herzliya, and then found myself in Ra'anana, and I've been here ever since.
Got it. So I'm sorry to go off on this tangent, but where in Ranana do you live?
Motzkin, Rehov Motzkin,
Motzkin.
down
Yeah.
on the other end of town, I think, from where your mom lives.
Right.
Uh,
Well, I live
but
in Bar Ilan, so that's just a few
are
streets
you in
away from
Maryland?
you.
So you're closer to me than your mom, right?
Yeah, I'm close.
You're not from
We
right.
we
You're
we positioned ourselves in the building right next to the Maccabi Health Center.
not. Okay,
So
sure. A
right
10-minute
next
walk.
to it, which I know this is not the topic of this podcast, but that was a very good decision because it meant that when our 4 kids were growing up, we had no parking issues in the area. We could just hop over to the medical center.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
right.
So
Yeah, well, all of
yeah,
Radan is a very compact community in any case. So
right,
one of the attractive things about it, full service,
for sure.
but very, very compact and
Yeah,
accessible from anywhere by
right.
walking. I mean, by walking, I mean,
Yeah,
you don't need a car for most things here, actually.
right. It also speaks to the American temperament of like straight, roads and clear
Uh,
design for the most part. I have one
yeah,
more
well,
question.
it was designed by for Americans back in the
I know, I
1920s.
know, I know.
Right, right.
One more question about
Sure.
your personal life. So you said you have 2 kids and grandkids. Just for the purpose of this context, are any of them currently in the army?
No, they're not. Actually, my son is in the U.S. He's been back and forth. He lives in New York now. Right now, my daughter lives in Tel Aviv,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, actually, so my kids are like a little bit too old actually at this point for the army, and the grandchildren, of course, way too young. So
Yeah,
no. The answer is no
yeah.
to that.
My eldest son is right now 18, and he's like in his
Mm.
first year in yeshiva, so he's just not in there. He would have 1 year extra and probably already.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Okay. So yeah, so I think we'll move on to the topic for which we come together.
Sure.
So what I understood from my mother, who got us together, was that you were contacted by, I'm guessing, the government, but there's so much happening,
No,
not the government,
no,
because there's so
already not.
much. I mean, yeah. So I wasn't sure. She didn't say the government. I'm just saying I had assumed, but the truth is there's so much civil activity, right? Civilian like activity going
Right.
on now. So many volunteers, etc. That I really wasn't sure where it came from. The government is so slow. The idea that they would have thought about this now is
Yeah.
a little bit strange for me. So it makes more sense. So yeah. So maybe tell us what you were contacted to do and
Okay.
who contacted you,
Sure.
etc.
Okay. So, I mean, of course, during the first days of the war, where everybody was in shock and trying to figure out what was happening, and kind of paralyzed as internet, and life stopped, as normal life stopped. And at some point, everybody, pretty quickly, just got started to move. I mean, society started to move. The volunteer spirit here was extraordinary, as you know, and everybody mobilized in ways that were just wonderful. In fact,
Yeah.
and this regard, in terms of all the organizations that have been out protesting for the last year, kind of turned their organizational skills right towards the task
Right.
of mobilizing and helping people, helping
Right.
displaced persons, helping soldiers, supplies, you name it. I mean, in
Right.
every way. I mean, not just those organizations, of course, but really coming from just about all facets of society, and it's been extraordinary. So, the first days where I sort of finally kind of started to unfreeze, from being paralyzed, it was like, okay, what do I do? What do we do? What can I
Right.
do? And of course, the first of the obvious things were like, if you've got clothing to donate, if you've got supplies to give to families who are in need. Who I mean, that was easy, and it was easy. It was easy to do that because there were so many people collecting things and making it possible for you to give, to share things, and also financial things on many organizations, raising money, all that. But that's not enough. That certainly I think everybody feels they need to do more. So actually, what happened? I mean, I'll tell you the project. The project is actually to use my skills as a historian and as someone who understands the history of the conflict and the history as it's unfolding in front of our eyes, to document the events of one particular place. And this particular place is Kibutz Alumim, which is a
Mm-hmm.
small, one of the smaller kibbutzim down opposite the Gaza area. It's one of the two actually religious kibbutzim. They belong to
Mm-hmm.
the religious kibbutz of the religious kibbutz movement, and they are kibbutz is set back about 3 or 4 kilometers from the Gaza border. They were right behind Nachal Oz, and right down the road up the road a few kilometers from Be'eri, which some of the worst massacres took place. So what happened at Alumim actually is a really an inspiring story, and as you know, we've been inundated in the last week or so with stories of harrowing stories of terror, death, and destruction, and at the same time, incredibly inspiring stories of bravery and heroism, and people surviving unbelievable situations. So what happened at Alumim actually was that the security detail of the kibbutz, what's called the Kitat Konenut. I'm still looking for the right translation of that in English. It's basically
like an emergency
small group of emergency response team, but these are sort of like it's like a home guard. It's like a home guard. People trained. These are combat soldiers, veterans, and volunteers.
They're part of the kibbutz. They're residents of the kibbutz,
they're
but they have
members
additional
of the
training.
Kibbutz. Exactly, they're members of the kibbutz, and they have this role they're supposed to be able to provide
first
line of defense until the army arrives in security situations. And in this particular case, as the events unfolded there, as Hamas terrorists arrived and started to penetrate, in this particular place, the group, it was like about 12 men, 12 or 13, 12, including some that joined them, the young, recently demobilized soldiers who joined them, managed to battle the Hamas terrorists for hours and hours until the army on their own, until the army showed up. And of course, this is not unique. I mean, this was happening at every single kibbutz that they were on their own, and somehow, I mean, through as things unfolded, they managed to prevent the terrorists from taking over the areas that were the populated areas. Because
the kibbutz has areas that are. Right, because the kibbutz has areas like I'm not sure what Kibutz Alumim does, but they probably have areas that are like dedicated to agriculture or to raising cattle.
Yes, I mean, it's not. I mean, it sounds like. I mean, it's an unbelievable story. It's not as if people weren't hurt, and sadly, terribly, half of their foreign workers who were residing in another part of the kibbutz, half of their foreign workers were murdered.
So in other words, when Hamas got there and they found them, they just killed them. They came to kill Jews, but they didn't really care who they killed. Right?
They came to kill everybody that was there, and that's why many Arabs on the roads were killed too, drivers and things. They came to kill and wreak havoc on anyone that was on that they found on that side of the line. And so what I'm doing, and there were there were a few members of the kibbutzim who did die, who were killed on the road and coming and going, and there were some other people that were wounded. But you don't have you don't have some of the worst episodes that you had in other places where so many people were slaughtered. They prevented.
Here they were fighting.
They were fighting everywhere, but in this particular case, they managed to fend off the terrorists, and of course there weren't as many there as there were in other places. I mean, there lots of explanations would still have to be sort of sorted out. But
Right. What I meant when I said
then,
fighting, I meant that, like you said, that they were able to hold some sort of perimeter, so
yes,
that
they managed to hold and kill at least 10 terrorists on their own and hold off the others without allowing the penetration into the civilian areas, the neighborhoods where their families were hiding in the secure rooms, like
right,
as they were everywhere. And
right,
it's an extraordinary story, and almost minute by minute, hour by hour, and it took about almost 6 hours before military units actually were able to get there and eventually take over the fight,
right,
and the fight continued, and they continued to fight with them. But it's a story that's actually, has multiple stages and multiple
right.
levels, and I am actually so what I'm doing is collecting collecting the information, the documentation, the testimonies of people, of the fighters themselves, of those who were in this first response team, the oral testimony, written testimony, and I'm going to be the raw data will be given back to the kibbutz because they will want it for themselves, for their own records and archive or whatever. But
Of
at
course.
this stage, I'm planning on writing something about this, about the
Hmm.
events, the battle for Kibutz Alumim, uh, uh, and writing and publishing it in English in somewhere, and I don't know, maybe a long form magazine article and that's, we'll see once we'll see where I can place it. But the idea is
Right,
to
right,
really
right,
tell almost a micro history, kind of a fine grained report, fine grained report and analysis about what exactly happened on October 7th,
right.
on that early Saturday morning.
So I'll ask a few questions just to like frame this a bit. So I'm curious, one thought that went through my mind was I was trying to think why you chose Kibutz Alumim. First of all, I wasn't sure if you chose it or if this was somehow distributed amongst a bunch of historians by.
Serendipity. It's so many things that I've done academically. It just sort of kind of came into my lap because simply that a colleague of mine
Hmm.
who teaches at Bar Ilan,
Yeah.
and a good friend, has a good friend who lives at Alumim, and
Uh-huh.
it was actually this friend's initiative. He was already thinking, we need to have somebody, a
Right.
historian, somebody who can really do this. And he went to my friend, who he naturally, because that's who he knew. And my friend is not simply just wasn't available to take on the task, and he came to me and said, "Here's the story. Here's the story. Would you like to do this? I mean, what do you think?"
Yeah. So in other words,
And I
it's not part of some sort of an overarching organization saying let's document everything and every. It's specifically coming
no,
from the Yeshuv, from the kibbutz.
there are other people who are doing that. I know that there's a project I heard about in a couple sentences. That doctoral students from Tel Aviv University are
Hmm.
creating. They want to create a really. They want to collect material, as historians, to collect the material as it happens. And as you know, I'm sure you know, when it comes to oral history, uh, the longer time passes, the more
Of
versions
course.
naturally change.
Sure. People's
And in this
memory
regard,
gets
yeah, and
morphed.
in this regard, um, there's a real sort of desire to speak with people when it's fresh, and when it's fresh
Yeah.
in their minds.
It's
So,
it.
that's what
I'm
I've
trying to,
done.
for sure. I'm trying to put myself in that position because a part of me feels like, you know, taking the time, even the peace of mind of the person from Alumim to come to you and say, we want to do this, when we're, I think so, like the whole country is still, reeling from this, processing it on some personal scale and on a national scale, and these people also have on a community scale, right?
Yes.
Process what they've gone through to then, to me, a historian is someone who's doing that, trying to come at it, as much as possible from a objective standpoint, from trying to look at things and get to the truth. And the truth is sometimes, let's say, comes up in friction against, let's say, myth or emotion or things. Now, here, as you say, I don't think that there's any question that there will be, even if we kept it to the strictest, coldest history, there will be myths that will come out of this. This was a story of such a terrible neglect on the side of the army, the government, whatever, that it had, in order to survive, people had to have committed, performed heroically. So I don't have any doubt, but to be able to think in such a, like, to have the peace of mind to initiate that, and for you to be able to dive into this when it's still so fresh. I mean, it seems to me to be such a difficult time, even though, as you say, the earlier you get it, the better, but it sounds like it must be such a challenge, to be able to be in
Well,
that position.
yeah. Look, not for me, but for them, of course.
Yeah, of course.
Look, there will. I'm sure there'll be people that will prefer not to share their experiences, and understandably, but my sense uh, is that now that we're now 2.5 weeks into this,
Right,
and those these events took place then,
right,
that now people are sort of kind of gathering themselves up, and of course they're talking about it nonstop amongst themselves. I mean, they that's
of course,
that's the most natural thing in the world,
of
and
course,
and I'm sure like everybody, you've overdosed on the Israeli media, hearing the stories, night after night, hour after hour, and of course during the day too,
right,
on all platforms and outlets. And
yes,
so people are talking. They are talking, and they're people and journalists, of course, are reaching out to people. This is what the journalists do. They want to reach people and tell stories. So
right,
at this point in time, I think as more and more people are ready to talk. And honestly, I think, as far as I'm concerned, and I think people always should have have had and always have had should have a kind of a reserve, a little bit of healthy skepticism, like, okay, who is this person? Why do you want to talk to me? And what are you going to do with it? And
right,
that's an approach that you should always have with journalists as well, because you don't want things to be misused or manipulated or presented in a distorted way. Like we said before, you want to try to
correct.
have a little bit of control about what you're saying, what your story is. So I myself, I mean, he spoke. This sort of began with my friend's friend, who put me in touch with a couple other people in the kibbutz, and they almost it's almost like they vetted me, to
Right,
kind of like, okay, who is this guy? Who
right,
is this
for
guy,
sure.
and what are his qualifications? And yeah, we think the idea of a professional historian doing this is a great idea, but just let's just meet and talk and see what I'm about as a person, what I'm looking for, and again, it was all very friendly, and they were very, very open and positive about me doing this, but they still, I think, wanted to hear a little bit more, to get to, which is before they start recommending, oh, talk to him, talk to this one, and this one, or start reaching out, which is fine. It's totally understandable,
Yeah,
and
for sure.
I am now sort of well past that, I think, already,
So
and
how long have you been doing this for? How
well,
long how long ago did it start?
it started about what day is today? The 23rd. Yeah, it started about a week after the events. So we're in
I
the
see.
middle of the third week. So it's about
A week and a half ago.
8 or 9 days.
Yeah.
On this, and it takes some time to set appointments up and then process what I've heard, and I'm collecting a lot of material as well. As I say, background material, things that have already been published, things that have been on television. It's
Yeah.
drawing on it,
For
and of course,
sure.
the more you do it, the more things you think of, and the more angles you have, and the more questions you have, and you think, oh, well, what about this would be a good source of that? I mean, it's really the work that in some level I'm trained to do, right?
Right.
As a
For
historian. I mean,
sure.
it's my in a way it's my bread and butter. I've never done military history per se, and
Yeah.
I'm not a military historian, and and this is I'm writing of something very contemporary with with minimal perspective. I mean, as historians, we always like to have perspective, and so the perspective I can bring to this is more the perspective of context and background. But the heart of the story is really what did happen on that morning, and what did people do? How did they function? What kind of what was going on, and how did they manage to achieve what they achieved? Because the achievement is extraordinary.
Really is.
Alongside of that, again, there are tragedies in this
For
story
sure.
which will be there as
Right.
well,
Right.
and will have to be they will appear as well, because that's what we're about. As you said, there's no one truth. There's no exact, one outcome. One for everybody has perspective, and everybody has inherent bias as well. Everybody has an
Yeah.
orientation, but
For sure.
we again as historians, we have we're trained to recognize that, and we're trained to understand where we're coming from, a little self-reflection, self-criticism, and
Right.
then bring in organize the material in a way that that is commensurate with the way our understanding, and that is commensurate with the facts as we understand them.
Right. So
Yeah,
tell me, so for such
yeah,
a, I'm just trying to get a sense, right? One of the things that I think characterizes events like this is how almost every minute, you know, was like, counted. So many things were happening.
yes.
How long, more like an academic question, how long just to cover a few hours in the life of this yeshuv, right? Um, how long does it take to collect and put that all together? Just to such a,
Well,
like it's
you're,
just a few hours in a very, very busy day,
sure.
obviously. But
Oh,
what I'm trying to get a sense of, are you embarking now on a year-long mission, or if
oh no
this
no
is
oh no 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 definitely not. I mean, I mean, I would like to I would like to have a draft of this, within a few weeks,
okay?
and I'd like to, be able to publish it, while
For
it's
sure,
still,
still fresh. Yeah, still
relevant. I mean,
relevant.
for general audience, that a intelligent reader in an intelligent publication would want to read it.
Right, of course.
This is, like we have these kinds of articles, like from Ukraine, embedded
Right,
reporters. They do really, deep story, and a month or so later, you read about it in the Atlantic or in the New York
right.
or somewhere else. I would, but
Just
again,
one
it
second. I'm
depends
sorry. I
on.
apologize.
Mhm.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, no problem.
Yeah. See, I told you that it would be like
It
interruptions.
does.
Yeah,
It does also depend on on the material.
of course.
If so, things usually academics, you probably know, academics take longer than they plan to do things.
Right,
Sometimes it's because of for a variety of reasons, but
right,
sometimes it's just you have so much material that you takes time to digest, and you have to make selections. What do you include, what not? um, the whole story, the writing. Writing history, I think in any field really, it's a creative process. I mean, it's not like I just collect data and then I copy paste
for sure.
and set it out. I mean, it's and I never quite know how it's going to look until I actually do it. because
Right,
when
of
you're
course.
writing, you're creating, and you're
Yeah,
thinking in a way that you weren't thinking before. Like, oh,
right.
when you, so
You
so
see
I don't
connections
want.
that you didn't see before, right? So that
Absolutely,
you, right,
absolutely. Just your choice of words, the way you arrange the material, the
right,
kind of where you choose, what you choose to emphasize, and where.
right. You
Um,
also suddenly
but
understand things like, there's like I'm guessing in your case, you might find out that there was like a bush somewhere that if that bush was 5 meters to the left, everything would have
yeah,
changed or something, so you,
I also, at some point when I feel like I've got a really, decent sort of picture uh, of what happened, I will most certainly, the situation permitting, I want to actually go down there and walk around and just get a feel for the place, personally
right,
to get it set in
right,
my own mind, to have an images of the place. And I've seen plenty of
right,
pictures, and there've been plenty of there already been stories on in the media showing things that are going on, but I still want to get down there myself.
sure. I have,
Obviously, not gonna do it. If it's if
right, of
it's
course,
if the
until,
fighting is still going on,
of
but
course.
that,
And
that's
so
that's another.
I think I have two more questions,
Sure.
for us here. Um, and of course, maybe we'll even have another session maybe in a few weeks, if still, if things are still going on, to hear more about the outcome of your research. But the one is just, um, to know if from the things you've already begun talking to people and reading, etc. If you have already begun talking to people individually, are there things that you've already, like, maybe it's still early in the process, but is there something that you like sort of understand now that maybe a person who hasn't had that direct contact, let's a person like me who's all that I've been fed is from the media, right? So I have and I admit that I have been trying to avoid a lot of the deep dives into places just because it's very hard to read right now, and trying to keep sane and to move forward. And I'm you know taking it in whatever dosages I can. I'm curious if there's anything you've already gotten a sense for that maybe other people that haven't had such a direct, unmediated, kind of contact with the people that went through this. Is there anything you can, like, if there's something you can share, like one or two things from that? That's my first question. Like, if there is, it's okay to say that you're still early and you're not sure, but if
Well,
there is, I'd be happy to hear.
sure, sure. Well, look. One of the questions that I was asked by a few people, some friends abroad, as this was unfolding, and even here too, is so someone just asked questions like, "Why would you live there? Why do people live there? I mean, what are they doing there? Why should they live there? Why do they live there? And why would they want to go back there? And
Because it's
because
dangerous, right? That's the question, right?
exactly,
So
exactly.
yeah,
So one of the people I talked to actually said something really interesting. She said, we always said that living down here was 95% the Garden of Eden and 5% hell. The Garden of Eden was the pastoral life, lush surroundings, high quality of life, community, secure economic security, a, in a beautiful part of the country, and
right,
the 5%, of course, was with the periodic rocket attacks and concern about what
your
when
safety,
bigger military operations, etc.
right,
Uh, Obviously, that 5% is no longer 5%. That's
right,
it's there's a collective trauma, and they're the ones who have experienced it first and foremost, with the terrible losses. So, I mean, you know what I'm hearing from people, and it's not unique. I think people are really determined to rebuild, and to go back to their homes.
yeah,
And it was going to take months before
sure,
at the very least, uh, and they're going to need a lot of help. But there's a lot of determination to that. But they are also, made it clear that that there's no going back to the situation that was before, and that if the state wants people to live in those areas, live there again, then they have to create a situation. So you hear that determination and also anger that anger that they were left defenseless, that they had to fend for themselves. Nobody was prepared for this kind of situation. The security detail did not. They trained for a terrorist penetration of the kibbutz, but obviously nothing of this scale, and certainly no one expected it to take many hours before the Air Force and the Army showed up.
Right.
So that's one thing. Something else.
I'll just say about that really, I think it's very clear. Like I said at the beginning, I think all of us. I don't think it matters what political affiliation you are. I think everybody, realized like very quickly that we have to push down our anger and our disappointment and frustration, but anger at our government, at the people running the army, that allowed this to happen until things calm down. But that anger is there, and it will definitely
it's absolutely there. It's absolutely there, and you're seeing it already.
Some places
expressed every single day. The divisions are still there, and the new issues are coming up. And I mean, but the other thing I wanted to say is that in talking to members of this group, the ones who actually did the fighting, the extraordinary determination that people exhibited and courage, and okay, these are all people who are combat. They're trained as combat soldiers. They to begin with, they're not people who just said, "Oh, I'd like to be in the Civil Guard. Why don't you teach me how to shoot a few rounds?" These are people who, have had serious military experience. Nothing like this necessarily, but their determination to show up and get out there and leave their families in a room which may or may not be safe. And to go out and really put their bodies on the line to literally defend their homes. It's not just an abstract notion. It was a concrete notion. They're carrying on a fight. Talk with someone who was having a firefight 60 meters from their house. I mean, this is and the focus of these guys is, they didn't think about anything but the mission. They sort of turned off everything else, the concern for their families, any kind of questions, what if, what that. No, it was just like, this is what we're trained to do, and this is what we have to do, and we have to figure out a way, given the unfavorable circumstances that we find ourselves in. We have to figure out how to win this fight, literally to win, and so that their families would not be overrun. It's
for sure. No, these are people. As you said, they were part of a. It was their physical home. It was a small kibbutz, so that means the community is their extended family. It's not. And you said it's not abstract. It's, in a sense, when we see a lot of times, like wars. If I'm like sort of like taking, I think I'm trying to like sort of like encapsulate what you're saying. Many times in wars, like we look at Ukraine, so we look at it from afar as this big, motion of armies and just borders being drawn somewhere. But this is, down to the very, very basics, right? There's a bunch of people with guns coming to kill you and everything that you know. And you have to stop that. That was what they were facing.
This is has not happened in Israel.
Exactly.
For decades and decades. It's really, we haven't witnessed anything like this since 1948.
Right.
I mean, there were plenty of terrorist attacks after that in the 50s,
Right.
especially before, but nothing on this kind of scale,
Correct.
where whole villages and towns were under siege and and people were being killed and captured
Right.
and having their homes torched and people being evacuated, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
So I mean, this is the surprise. We were caught by surprise the way we were caught in 1973. The fight has many aspects that resemble 1948, except this
Right.
time, this time we.
In 48, we were expecting it. Here, we weren't expecting it,
Yeah,
amongst other things.
and Israel was it was basically fighting with its own militias. What didn't have a
Right.
strong and powerful
That's right.
state,
Correct.
but but I mean, obviously points to
Yeah.
many points
Yeah.
of comparison, differences and similarities, but
Of course.
and as you know, in terms of the massacres and the situations that people found themselves in, this evoked the worst things in the Jewish collective memory, the worst episodes in the history of the Jewish people, the collective memory. I had a friend, actually a classmate of mine from high school, who lives down there on another kibbutz, and I remember on Saturday morning in the middle, I remembered. I remembered. Well, oh, he's down there. I should check in with him, see what he's doing. So
Right.
I messaged him on Facebook. That's how we communicate. And he answered me very quickly. And he said, "I'm in a room with my 3-year-old granddaughter and my wife, and
Right.
and Hamas tried to get into my mama into the room, and they didn't succeed. They didn't succeed. It turns out that he had purchased a chain to lock the door from the inside,
Wow.
which some 10 years ago somebody had manufactured these chains for that purpose, and he bought one, and that's how he survived. And at some point later, I said, what do you got there? And he said, I've got. I checked in with him again, and he said, well, I've got a bottle of water and a granola bar and a waste paper basket for his bodily functions. And then he said, "Oh, and I've got a secret door behind the library here, like like Amsterdam, 1943. Black humor referring to Anne Frank." So and it was, as I say, and he survived, and thankfully he survived. His neighbors were kidnapped, and again, it's just another story. But the massacres and the helplessness of so many people obviously evoke the worst moments in the collective memory of the Jewish people, and that is something that will
we're going to be unpacking that for a while.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, anyway, Bruce, thank you very much. I think we're going to wrap up here. It was really very, very, first of all, insightful and fascinating to hear what you're doing. I'm really looking forward to seeing. I mean, not happy that it happened, but looking forward to seeing the final result of your work.
Thanks.
And yeah, maybe also obviously there's placing this within the general history of the state and the Jewish people is going to be something that will be talked about a lot. So maybe we can have a session at some later point to talk about that as well.
Yeah, and in fact, Alumim, it was actually built on the ruins of a kibbutz named Be'erot Yitzchak, which was established originally in 1943 and was a scene of terrific, horrible fighting in 1948. As the Egyptian forces invaded and attacked, and eventually that kibbutz was evacuated and reestablished later in another part of the country. And so this, Alumim was was founded on that. In that spot, and there's even like a whole a museum there telling the story of the precursor and the water tower.
There's definitely an element. I mentioned this to my father recently, that there's definitely an element in this period that feels to me like, again, for my listeners, I'm sorry, I think I've mentioned this at least twice already on the podcast, but it's just a thing that has been resonating in me for a long time. Ronald Reagan, in his inaugural address, I think in '84, said, when he was just talking about the transfer of power democratically, he said that, we take this thing called freedom for granted, but actually that freedom is never more than one generation away from being lost, and that every generation has to fight again for its freedom. And I think that this is a theme that I feel very much now. Feels to me like, Independence War 2.0. And we'll see what happens. Anyway, I think we're gonna wrap it up here.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Bruce. And
my pleasure.
until next time.
Okay, you have a good evening.